Thank you. Good evening, and thank you all for giving up your Monday night to join us. The agenda tonight, I'm going to have just a few opening comments, then I'll turn it over to Randy Gutenberg, our superintendent of school, and hopefully we will be able to go through his presentation and get down to you being able to kind of dialogue and ask questions in about a half hour. Oops, sorry. So to begin with, I'm Joan Ensign, the current president of the Board of Education. We have a few other board members here that I'd like to introduce and a few that are tuning in to the live stream that's available this evening, starting with David Betcher, a director in Frontier. Brian Hafer. I know Ted Fry is here, thank you. And is Jack Heineman here yet? Jack, thank you. So 2 of our board members couldn't be here, but as I said, they are tuning in to the live feed that we have available this evening. So one of the things that we do as board members is we set priorities each year. And a priority that has been kind of ongoing for several years is community engagement. And we have done that a variety of different ways, and this is what we are committed to this year, is to offer more of a large group dialogue interaction. After tonight, I know we will probably look at how it worked, how it didn't work, what we might change for the future. But we're kind of committed to at least 4 of these throughout the school year on different topics as they come up and we will announce. So before I turn the mic over to Randy, I just want to make a few comments. At the beginning of the school year, Randy used this slide. He's our superintendent and he welcomed our staff member with this slide, Live a Great Story. Actually, he gave everybody stickers as they walked in, and I plastered mine to my phone, and I look at it frequently, and as I reflected on tonight, I thought, that's really a great message. Live a great story. And I think as we gather together here tonight, we get to make that great story about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what it means for us in this community. We have many people, many partners that we use in that story, starting with you coming, showing up today, offering your words to us. We have a DEI ad hoc committee. And our staff and our administration has been working on parts of this story for years, really. What I hope our story involves our students. I think when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it needs to be how our kids feel and what that story is for each of our kids. I know that many of you know me and that I've been in education for 40 plus years. 33 years I taught in this district, and when I was going through my teacher training, we talked about connections. We talked about having students feel part of a family through connections. And I think the story is kind of the same today. Connections make kids feel like they belong, and I think feeling that sense of belonging is what we should try to achieve. So if we did this in the 70s and the 80s, what's different today? And I feel the difference today is what's happened in our population. We have a very different student than we had in the 70s and the 80s. So I think we need different strategies when we talk about and look at what makes a child feel like they belong and feel like they are part of the system and part of the unit. One thing that frequently came up as I went through my teacher training is that student outcome and their success in the classroom really is based on that sense of belonging. They need to belong. We need to help them belong. So as we look at our great story and what we are creating here, I hope that in our story, we can say that each day, each student will feel welcomed, will feel accepted, and will feel like they really belong to our community. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Randy Gutenberg, Superintendent of Schools.
Awesome. Thanks, Joan.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joan. I'm going to stand up here and just talk about a few things. First of all, I think these hopefully go without needing to be said, but I think in the topic we're talking about tonight evokes a lot of emotion. So I think with that, it's important that we start off with a few ground rules as far as how we want to conduct ourselves this evening. My hope is by the end that we find some commonalities amongst us that we can move forward and work together as a community. But I think first of all, looking at a community of respect, one where we can respect everybody, all the participants, the people presenting here this evening, and please refrain from any of the clapping or shouting if there's somebody that you approve of their comments or things that don't align with really your beliefs. I think we have to recognize we all come from very diverse experiences, and that's what we're coming into this space with. We want to also encourage participation. In a little while, in a few minutes, I'll talk about how we're going to do some of that participation tonight, but I ask that people limit their comments to generally around 3 minutes so that then we can have more conversation tonight. We are trying to keep our program tonight till about 8 o'clock. We'll assess that as we kind of go through the evening to make sure that we're watching our time. I ask you to please refrain from naming any staff or students. I mean, my whole administrative team is here tonight. If there's something that has come up, I really recommend that you would kind of talk to them one-on-one. We all know what our Dane County order is. I appreciate everybody's respect of that. And then this is kind of where I ground my work, and Joan started it off. Everything we do is about kids. That's why I do the work that I do. That's the number one reason that I believe so strongly in our school district, and it's the passion that I bring to the work that we do. So I just ask that we kind of come here with good intentions, and it is my hope that we're here because we all want what's best for our students. With that, I'm going to jump into a few things, and I'm going to go pretty quickly through these slides. But as Joan already said, in our strategic framework, we have districts planning for equity and access of opportunities. That's been there for about 4 or 5 years. It's kind of changed over time, though, and since that time of us putting that out there, the one thing that I see that's evolved is the definition of the word equity. It now has become a word that has a lot of different meanings, and I think if we ask the people in the room here, and the folks who are watching on the live stream, we all have a notion of what that means to us. My purpose for us this evening is to be able to walk through some of our why that we are talking about here in Waunakee. What are some of the things that we're talking about when we define equity? And as we walk through the presentation tonight, I think you'll get a little better picture of that. Can't say it's going to be something everybody in the room agrees with, but I think it's going to be a truthful portrayal of really the work that we're trying to do and how we're looking to support our kids. All right, let's start off with access. I mean, these are things that aren't new to education. I mean, the first 2 items I have up there is opportunities. We look at our students with disabilities. We look at kids who are falling with our Pathways, Gifted and Talented programs. Those are all about access to the appropriate curriculum so that we can move kids forward and that they can learn. That's really what education's about. So we are differentiating. We are looking at ways that we can provide equity of access to meet the kids' needs of where they begin. But it also expands beyond that. When we look at it, it moves outside of the classroom. I can remember conversations not too many years ago where we're talking about how do we include all of our special ed kids? Can we get them on stage here for our drama and our music productions? Can they be in our clubs that have outside of school hours? Can we have students who are participating in athletics that maybe they traditionally would not have tried? And the answer to those has been yes, we have. So we've expanded our offerings, expanded our opportunities, expanded our staffing to support kids. Now, I would also state that for both of those bullet points, I have budget requests on my desk that will go into our budget process that look at how do we expand those. So it's not like just because we've done some things and moved things in a direction that we're done with our work. We have growth in both of those areas to still do. But then as we move forward, we see that we also have some other things that we want to work with. We want to be able to reach all of our families so that they have the same information about what's happening in our schools. We want our kids to have access to the awesome curriculum that our teachers are putting forth and the high expectations that Waunakee has put forth for all of its students. We have 129 students today who qualify for our English Learner Program. So these are kids who need support with their language access to be able to access our curriculum. And we have staff, and some of them are here tonight, who put forth that work. That's also precipitated in the board putting forth and approving a full-time translation and interpretation, because our needs have grown to those levels. And I'll talk a little bit about demographics in a minute. But looking at opportunities to access special ed, gifted and talented, things where we are trying to give families access and students access to curriculum for language barriers. And financial assistance. This is something that we're very blessed in Waunakee because we're a very generous community. But we've had in place a policy that was waiver of fees policy for years. Steve Summers and I were just talking about this afternoon, about how at one point in our work, we thought, you know, we are doing what we need to support kids economically because we waive those fees. But we all know as parents that the fees that we often have in school and in our activities go beyond just the initial fee to participate in the activity. And so we established in 2017 a financial assistance committee that has been targeting ways that we can help kids with co-curriculars, with our community ed programs, food service and food. That was a big conversation that actually started some of this dialogue. School trips that they normally wouldn't have access to, other clubs, other activities, really trying to make sure that we removed that barrier from families so that kids weren't impeded upon from participating fully in our program solely based on economics. And as Jonas talked about, we talk about connections to school. I mean, this is, I think, my 27th year in education. This is my why. This is why we teach. We teach to connect with kids. Every year when we bring in our new teachers, I ask them one question. I ask them, who's your favorite teacher? And I ask them that for a very specific purpose. Because no matter which audience I've been doing this with, most people can figure out that person within just a few seconds. You know who's made a connection with you. You know who's made a difference. It's often not, sorry Joan, I know you're a math teacher, but it's not because this person identified this algorithm better than somebody else. The story is always about they made a connection, they made learning fun, they made me want to be at school. And those are the things that we want for all of our students. When I look at our clubs and our organizations, and this is primarily high school, that's my example here, these are all things that have originated from students. Most of our clubs, and we have 65 plus of them, have not originated with any driver or any agenda of a staff member. They've been brought forth because kids wanted a place where they can have a sharing of their ideas, where they can have a sharing of their identity, and where they can be sharing their interests. The equestrian team is the one that jumps to mind probably the most vividly because they came to our board meeting probably 10, 11 years ago. And the kids said, you know what, we value being at school, we love our school, we want a connection to it. Our hobby, the things that we do, where we compete, is on the equestrian field, or in that ring, in that arena. And there's a high school equestrian organization in the state, can we join that? So that I can wear the Waunakee colors and represent my school and feel like I belong. And the board fully and wholeheartedly supported that. So when I look at our clubs and our organizations, and sometimes I receive feedback on why we have one club versus another, and is there some sort of agenda? The agenda is connection, because we want kids to be connected to school, and we provide opportunities for kids to do so. And that kind of moves into student voice, because some of the things that have resonated the strongest with me over my career has been listening to what our kids say. So we already talked a little bit about the socioeconomic disparities, but the things I think that resonated with Steve and I a few years ago was when we actually had kids tell us, I never considered doing, and you can fill in the blank of what the activity is, because I knew my family couldn't afford it. They didn't want to ask their family for the money to do something, so they just chose to opt out. To me, that's not a good answer. We have to be able to do better than that, particularly in our community that's very well resourced. So the Financial Assistance Fund was really developed to try to address that. But that was a real thing that for years we were trying to work with. Linguistic barriers. If you've registered, if you're new to our district, you register your kids out at my office, out at Bethel Circle. That's where our registrar is. Just a few years ago, it was not uncommon for families that didn't speak English to come in and literally have their third grade child be the one that registers the family because they're the one that speaks the best English. And that's really hard to see. And the families that want to be here, they want to engage in the school, but the language barrier was definitely there, not only for the kids, but for the families, for us to engage. Think about how we get information as parents through Infinite Campus and all of those type of messages. Those all aren't readily available for access, and we need to see how we can do better. And that's a piece that we just shared of a need that we saw that's led us to do a better job of trying to translate things and interpret things for our families. I put the other one up here just because I think that's just kind of these are the other pieces that come into our school. Ideas about religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, individual beliefs, current events. These are things that our kids come in. As they connect in with school, as they connect in with their teacher, these topics come up in school. And I know as a teacher right now, it's hard to know exactly how to respond to those. So part of the value of us talking about these things in our community is that these are on our kids' minds, even our youngest kids' minds. And they're coming into that space, and we need to know how are we going to respond to that. I'm going to continue with student voice because these are some of the things that when I kind of look at some of the work we're doing, it's really kind of what else is driving this. And these are conversations that I've kind of just summarized out into 7 quick bullet points. And what you're going to find is some of these are good for all kids. It's not just something we're targeting at one set of students versus another. They're good for all of our children. When we look at desires for more connections to our staff, our students, our school, and our community, that's something we should be striving for all of our kids. The one piece that I kind of look at, though, is when we look at kind of where we all come from. I mean, I grew up in small town southern Wisconsin. And if I tried to relate to anybody else who's in small town southern Wisconsin, I have a band of folks that I can connect with very strongly. But I know that that's not my entire population of my student body. So we need to be thinking about how do we make connections with all kids, not just a narrow band. Lack of advocacy and experience. Again, this is a generalization. It doesn't fall for all of our families. But we have some kids that are trying to figure out school and the system on their own. Started off with even how to register for school, but it goes all the way through as far as how do I get involved in activities? How do I access financial assistance if I need it? How do I apply for college? These are all things we need to make sure that we bring forth to support all of our students. Racial slurs is a hard one because it's one of those things I think we all agree is not appropriate. I certainly see things in schools that this occurs. Some of them are very blatant, very directly racist, and are very directly hurtful and intended that way. And we address those. I would say there's others that are uninformed, where kids use words that they hear in other places, and they transfer it into another setting, and it causes a challenge. And I think that's some of the work that we find and what we hear from our students, is they want those things to stop for either reason. And they want kids educated on why that's not appropriate. We also hear from our students about lack of diverse students within their school. They want people who have shared experiences, who they can look to, they can interact with, and they can see themselves as they move through and see opportunities. They want high expectations for all students. That's something we should all be striving for. But the perception from some of our families is that we push some students and not others. It's not about lowering expectations, it's about raising it for everybody to make sure that all kids are challenged to the highest degree possible. because that's how we achieve more. It's a desire to see themselves in what we teach. I mean, sometimes that is cultural, sometimes that's racial, sometimes that's gender related. And those are all conversations that we've heard from our students as we've started to look at changes in curriculum and changes in classes that we offer, particularly at a highly elective high school like the one we're in tonight. And then alumni feeling and communicating with us that they don't feel completely prepared for a more diverse world. Now, I don't think as a school district we can own all of that, because we all have responsibilities as parents to help our kids to experience the world that's around us. We get them for 7.5 hours a day for 10 months. So we as a community have to come around really much of what we're talking about tonight, but the school plays a role because we make very strong connections with kids. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I ask my kids how their day was, they say one word: fine. That's meant as a joke, but that's actually true. I mean, when I talk to our kids here who've made strong connections with us, they talk in sometimes a more broad and diverse way, and they bring forth things to us. So we need to make sure that we're making some of those connections so that we can interact with our students appropriately, and also work with you so that we know how to do that, and we can make sure that we're on the same page working together for our kids. So where's our district's work? Our district work is creating a safe environment for all kids, eliminating barriers so that kids can have access to the curriculum and the opportunities we provide. It's promoting resources and opportunities to connect kids to school. Like, the board has been excellent with that over time. I can't think of a time when we brought a kid activity to the board that they haven't approved. Looking at how we work with our staff, because as we start talking about the diversity of our student body, we need our staff to feel comfortable for how do you interact with not just a narrow band of kids that maybe traditionally you interact well with, but how do we interact well with all kids? We listen to our students from what they need for us, and we also have to realize this isn't a one-shot deal. This cannot be the only meeting we have on this. And this should not be the format we're doing it in a big PAC where I've got mics down front. My vision is I'd like to propose is that we have an opportunity at a point in the future where we can have more conversations about some of the things we're going to talk about tonight around tables in our cafeteria and have a facilitated discussion. I was talking to some folks over the last couple weeks. I think that's a really important piece for us to come together, provide unity and understanding. So let's talk about our kids, because this is one that I often find that when I talk to people in the community, they don't truly see really what the demographics of our student body is. I mean, it's shocking to think about in this day and age that we have 9% or 383 kids who don't have access to really high-speed internet at home. So when you look at things like last year when we were pushed into a virtual environment, this was a huge equity issue for us. We had to find a way to connect with kids. So just to give you context, the room we're in right now holds 674 seats. So if we filled every seat, it's 674. So I want you just to kind of use those numbers to kind of give you an idea of like how full this auditorium is. Economically disadvantaged, we're 5.8% as a community. I think the state average, and I'm throwing this off the top of my head, I think it's somewhere around 45%. So in our district, we're at about 6%. So we have about 256 kids who really on a marker of like free and reduced lunch eligibility fall into that area. Students of color, 670 students, 15% of our student population. I think when you break that out, you have a higher percentage of them at the elementary level. So we have more students and at a higher percentage coming through our system than we have here at the middle school and high school who are kind of towards the end of their education career. Students with disabilities is 9.7% or 425 kids. Related to that is Section 504. Section 504 is for a student who probably doesn't qualify or doesn't qualify most likely for like a student with a disability per like federal law, but is eligible as a disability for accommodations to access the curriculum. Section 504 is part of the Rehabilitation Act of like 1972, something of that nature. It's just it's a marker towards a part of that legislation that applies to education. But we have plans for 145 students. English language learners, I already talked about 129 students. But when you start to look at what we have for interpretation needs, 92 students and families need some level of translation or interpretation. We service right now students with English language learning as their second language, 14 different languages in the district. The primary one is Spanish. That's why you see most of our stuff is translated into Spanish. We also have a growing population of Mandarin. I asked my staff what's the third one? Third one is Burmese. And then it goes, and some of these are relatively low end numbers as you move forward. But we have students that we're supporting all the way through our system, 14 different languages. But when you look at our home language survey, which we do when we have kids that register for our district, there's 36 languages housed within our community. One of the things that we also have to be is we're held accountable. We're held accountable to some of the demographics that we have here, some of the disaggregated data that we have here by these pieces. We're held accountable for achievement. We're held accountable for, in this case, disproportionate number of students, in this case, black students, who qualify for special education. So that could be a student who's been here their entire career or somebody who moved in 3 months ago. But they count towards our disproportionality piece. And this is really a ratio. It's not breaking down into like individual IEP plans. It's looking at this holistically as a district. But as a result of that, in 2019, we were identified as disproportionate. There's a couple other areas that we're starting to get close that we're monitoring. And as a result of this, it requires an allocation of time and resources. And part of what we've identified is in order to potentially change some of that data, change some of that pieces that we're seeing, is we need to be able to figure out how do we make better connections. We feel if we can make better connections, better relationships with kids, we can help kids grow. So we've partnered with a number of different groups. We work with the Dane County Equity Consortium. This is really all the Dane County schools, plus I think everything. We have membership from Rock County, Greene County, Dodge County, Sauk County, Columbia County, really coming together just to have conversations and work together around these topics. National Equity Project, Minority Student Achievement Network, Nehemiah Group out of Madison, CISA 2 is a cooperative education agency. Ho-Chunk Nation has been a partner, particularly through like the sesquicentennial pieces in the village, through our email and through our board meetings. I mean, critical race theory is an academic construct. It's not something we teach in school. I mean, when I think back over my education career, there's only one place I saw critical theory, and that was in grad school. And that was when we had to write about things that to try to dissect things from like a sociology point of view around communities. And you had to write from a certain point of view, one of them being a critical frame. But it's not something we teach in school. When I look at what we teach, particularly with our staff, we want our staff is to help everyone understand how to best connect with students. We try to understand individual experiences, how they are similar and different than our own, and thereby enhance our relationship with all kids. For me, that's what our work's about. I realize that these are challenging terms, and that these are things that have lots of meaning for people. For me personally, as we kind of are going to be kind of now segueing into some of our comments, to me it's all about how we connect and work with kids. How do we provide an environment where they see themselves and where that they feel connected so that they can learn. So when you look at this from a district perspective, this is what we do. This is as honest as I can be with our community about the work that we have embarked on. And as a connection to that, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself in a few slides, our board in spring of 2020 did put forth a diversity and equity and inclusion committee. It was an ad hoc committee which was really focused on trying to determine kind of what are those things that we should be putting our focus to. When you walked in tonight, you saw their recommendations. And I'm not going through those in depth here tonight. You received them when you walked in the door. They were also part of a presentation given at our last school board meeting. These are some pieces that our school board has to make some decisions on as far as how we're going to move some of those things forward and how we're going to kind of put together on a formal level, at a board level, the work around DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. But you'll see those items in front of you tonight, so I'm not going to go through them in depth here tonight. But I do want to hear from you. I mean, I know I've kind of spoken longer than I really wanted to. I want to open this up for the community to be able to come forward and ask questions or make comments. And the way we're going to do this, I'm going to step down there by Joe and Brian and Dave in just a moment. But we're going to have people come from around the corners. So you see, like Eric, if you can raise your hand over there, you'll kind of usher people this way. And Steve's over here. Raise your hand, Steve. We'll have people come around there. The microphones are right up front. And what we're going to be doing then is I'm going to ask you to act, it's kind of counterintuitive. We're going to have you face that way because that's where we're actually live streaming it and recording it so that the community can see who we are and what our question is. And certainly I'll be up here and our team will we'll try to answer as many questions as we're able to this evening. So what I would offer is if anybody has a comment or a question, I'll give you a few minutes to kind of organize yourself and you can kind of find your way around. I think, Annie, do we have people up by the mics too? All right, thank you very much. So you can come on up to here. We'll kind of bring forth that. I did have some written comments that were sent in to us prior to the meeting, and I think I'll answer a few of those while you're kind of getting your thoughts together. So what I'm going to do is when you come up, if you'll just say your name, and then so that we know who you are, and then you can ask your question or your comment. There were a few, I'm going to start off with a couple of them that came off of that were emailed to us. This one is from Kayla Lalande. Apologize if I don't do a good job with your last name. In general, what she's asking is, what supports do we have for LGBTQ plus students? And the answer to that is I think what we are doing is many of the things we've talked about. We try to provide our staff with some professional development to understand kind of the issues that LGBTQ plus students are experiencing in school so that we know how we can support them. We also have organizations like the GSA that are there that can bring together support networks within our schools, particularly at the middle school and high school. We also have our student counselors and our social workers who are also there to be of assistance to kids. So from an LGBTQ standpoint, those are some of the things that we have in place. Another question we have, and then I'll see if there's some folks who want to come up front, is how are we going to be addressing Native American symbolism and imagery? This one was brought by Mike Brandt. A couple different things. I think it's important that we have a process that we follow whenever we have an issue such as that to try to learn what our community is, to learn some of the research behind it, and have a process that we can stand by that is grounded in learning and in making that decision. We went through that process with the Warrior in the gym, in the old gym, and the part of the process with our imagery is going to be addressed through our branding process, which Annie Blackburn is leading for our district. It'll take place over the course of this year, and there'll be many different listening sessions that we can embark upon, and I encourage everybody from our community to find the listening session that resonates and that's available to you. So I think the imagery pieces we're going to address through our branding process. So are there some, yep, I'm happy to have you come on up.
I'm really nervous. Can you guys hear me?
You're good.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
I'm so sorry. I'm so nervous. I'm here to advocate for my child, and I'm in support of the equality and equity programs when it doesn't take away from others and is equitable for all. I'm going to read a few things, and I just want you to think about what you hear in comment. I'm sorry. Whites derive pleasure from racist performances. The importance of white groups in perpetuating the frame. I assess this history of material oppression and unjust enrichment for Europeans and European Americans. I then highlight the central role of elite whites in generating and maintaining the important elements of the dominant racial frame. Whites have made this to be so, the dominant white racial frame, and often obsessively. Include BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color stories, books from BIPOC authors. No mention of any other nationalities or races. Work with universities to recruit and or incentivize BIPOC candidates. Do you hear a general theme or trend? These are from the book our district paid $5,000 for, and part of DEI committee findings. My question to everybody, or who can answer, how will teaching or moving forward with the above ideologies, create an inclusive and equitable environment for all students in the district where they can feel a sense of belonging and feel welcome, free from implicit bias? Thank you.
All right. So, ma'am, can I ask you what the question was at the end?
Yes. How will teaching or moving forward with the above create an inclusive and equitable environment for all students in the district where they feel a sense of belonging and feel welcome and free from implicit bias?
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. Well, thank you for your comments. I mean, I think generally from the school district's perspective, I think some of the things that we are trying to do are hopefully kind of framed up in some of the things I talked about. I mean, certainly you saw the white racial frame was really a community read. That wasn't, we haven't had any of those pieces that have been required reading of our staff, but it definitely have had staff and community members who have engaged on that. I think part of it is just trying to understand everybody else's, a diverse view of experiences and what's being brought to the school environment. And through that, use that to kind of create that welcoming environment by building stronger connections. That's kind of where my perspective is. Okay. Yeah.
Whew, thank goodness I'm not first. Usually I get accused of being first at the buffet line I'm not shy. My name is Eric, and most of you have heard me speak before, but tonight I want to discuss unity as neighbors. It seems many of us have different views on certain things, but I'd suggest we actually share more views in common than some of our more divisive neighbors might suggest. I'm sure all of us in here in this auditorium want what's best for our children and for Waunakee schools. I don't think there is anyone in here that wants to see children face discrimination, bullying, or racism. I have to imagine we all want a welcoming, friendly, and diverse Waunakee. I can't imagine anyone in here that is advocating for the elimination or reduction of special education. I want every child in Waunakee to succeed, and I want every child to have the same equal opportunities for success. But there's a difference between wanting and supporting these things and pushing for a political ideology that seeks to equalize outcomes, especially when they're using a racial lens. Outcomes are a product of many things. Listen, we all have differing viewpoints and perspectives, but for expressing our views, there are a fringe group of members in this community that have disparaged me and my fellow Waunakee citizens, insinuating we're racist, bigoted, against LGBTQ, or trying to get rid of special education. They've even tried to insinuate we hate teachers. I've had some nasty community members purposely dox my employer online, and there are even calls for people to reach out to them. Let me share with you a brief synopsis of my perspective. I grew up without privilege. Dirt poor, living in a crime-ridden neighborhood, living in every crime-ridden neighborhood you can imagine. And when I say poor, I mean eating the cat food because I didn't have food, poor. That all changed when I was 10, and my mom found the love of her life and gained a new father. Their union wasn't popular in the 1980s, and we got looks in every store and restaurant that we went into. My dad and I had many conversations on race during my childhood, as he lived through some crazy times growing up in the 60s in the projects of Chicago. You see, my dad was black, and he instilled in me a strong respect for MLK's preachings. especially that part about judging a person based on their character, not by the color of their skin. My dad would rail against the victimhood mentality, saying, sure, I face challenges in my life, but using my skin color as an excuse for failure is a guarantee of future failure. You see, my stacked against you in every interaction is a recipe for failure, and I agree. Another part of my perspective is family. I have a child with an IEP, which grants special assistance. That's dictated because of their needs. I have another child that has taken AP classes, all based on ability. I don't know anyone that's against special education. Another crazy claim is that we're all hateful, right-wing people spewing Fox News talking points. Surprise, I've voted straight Democrat in all statewide elections for the last 10 years. I've marched in solidarity with teachers and state workers during Act 10, and I was at the Capitol for 31 days straight. So don't make assumptions, please.
I see a lot of faces that I know and have known in town for a very long time. I will be very honest right now. I have experienced major racism in Waunakee. Major racism. And people can say it doesn't exist here. It very much does. I've experienced racism from teachers in school. I've experienced would rather spit on me than acknowledge me in person, in town. I can walk to the house where my grandmother was born in town. My grandmother was a wonderful person here, and a lot of you would see me with her. And you'd be real nice when she was with me, but if I came over to play with your children after school, it only happened a few times. So please, when everyone here is saying that Waunakee is such a wonderful place, it is. I have major roots here, but it needs work. It needs major work. No one is saying that CRT should be taught to elementary school children or even high school children. DEI and CRT are not the same thing. We need to recognize that majorly. And we also need to recognize that no, not everyone is racist, and some people make uninformed racist comments. They need to be informed in situ so that it stops happening. And a lot of these are children because they hear it everywhere and they absorb it. Watch what you say around your children. You want to have those views? Fine. Don't say it in front of your children. Let them make their own informed views. But please do not say that there is no racism in Waunakee. Please do not say that there's no inequity in Waunakee. I work for an NEMT, that's a non-emergency medical transportation. The pressures and the difficulties to be able to find transportation right now to get students who just want to go and learn about the real world. They just want to go to the grocery store on a Friday afternoon to try and get those skills. And teachers are having to fight for that money. But we get new football uniforms every year. Look at that stadium out there. Look at that stadium out there. How much of that money could have gone towards taking care of the individuals who can't take care of themselves? Think about it, please. Last thing I'm going to repeat, CRT and DEI are not the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just have us kind of refrain from the clapping after folks. I mean, I think we have folks where it's hard to come up here and speak in front of a large audience, and I just appreciate just that respect for everybody.
Hi, I'm Nikki McLaughlin, and I'm a community member. I've got 2 little kids that I'm homeschooling right now because they both have special needs that wouldn't work out very well in a classroom. So I'm watching carefully because I want to send my kids to Waunakee. We moved here for the school. So I'm really glad that you're holding the DEI committee. I'm really glad that Superintendent is talking about having sessions in the cafeteria where we could all, same people, show up and sit around tables and talk to each other about this. And I just want to share just a few previous comments. My reaction to that is, So I grew up in a small town too in Wisconsin, and I really had to work hard to get where I am, but you know what? So what? And I didn't have any black people in my town, nobody of color. I'm from Native American descent, so I know about a tiny bit of my own diversity, but it's not the same. My skin is white. I get all the special privileges of walking into a room and not having anybody treat me differently because I'm just looking like the majority. Congratulations, right? When I see black people now, I have this complicated reaction that starts with that I can feel that little reptilian brain of mine from when I was a kid. I still go, weird, different. I'm not used to that. How should I act? It's goofy and stupid, and I wish I hadn't been. I wish I didn't have that experience. I wish I had a more diverse experience growing up. I didn't grow up in Waunakee, but I see, looking around me, moving here was a little bit like moving into my own past, because it's all this. It's very much white, and it's very much. Folks aren't used to that, and I feel that fear. I hear it from folks talking tonight. The fear of, if we start giving more resources to the other kids, what about my kids? Guys, the kids who come from backgrounds where their parents are of color, for generations, we have taken stuff from them. We have. And the Native Americans, we have taken stuff from them. So I'm really glad we're working with the Hoc Committee. So what we're doing now is just trying to give a little back. Give a little bit back so that we can all get to this point of equity. And there's a ton of work to do. That's why our culture is having such a big conversation about it now, and I'm really glad that Waunakee is engaging in it, and I'm really glad that folks are speaking in favor of it, so thank you for doing all this.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Keegan. I'm a parent here in the Waunakee School District. And at first, I just want to thank Mr. Gutenberg and all the staff and all the educators and all the members of the board who've made tonight possible. I think the ability for us to gather and have these important discussions is really, really critical to everything that we want to achieve, and what Mr. Gutenberg had summarized in his presentation of, we're really kind of here for our students, our children, and make sure that they are having all their needs met and that they're able to excel. So unequivocally, I support the DEI committee. I firmly believe that this is a community of people who help people. I mean, even through the presentation that Mr. Gutenberg presented tonight, these are all examples of how our community helps our neighbors. That's why I moved here. That's why my family moved here. That's why I'm excited to be here and send my children to school here. And that's what, for me, the DEI committee represents. Neighbors who are taking their precious time to go to our community, ask our students, ask our children, what do you need? How can I help? Volunteers, people who in the craziest time of their life are finding the time and the space and the emotional energy to ask how can they help. That should be honored, should be celebrated. That's why we're all here, right? That's why we are here for educators. That's why we're here serving on boards. That's why you're here working for the district. Because we're neighbors helping neighbors. So when I hear stories from parents of their children bullied or experiencing discrimination or being harassed or being afraid, I know that our community will rise, that we will respond, because that's what we do. We're neighbors helping neighbors. That's the Waunakee way. So now I stand here with all my community supporting this DEI committee and asking loudly and clearly, our neighbors are asking for help. Will we help them? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dan. I feel privileged. I'm on the short side, so I get up real quick. My question is around the DEI committee and the diversity. I know they said it was the most diverse committee they worked on. I'm already one that's talked to school boards, so I don't want the DEI committee to become standing. However, if the DEI committee becomes a standing committee, will it be re-energized with new members that are actually diverse in thought? Because I look at the DEI committee and I watched some of the presentations, there was very little diversity of thought in the committee. I think if diversity is important, we need diversity of thought on the DEI committee, not groupthink on the DEI committee. Okay. So is that going to, first, is the DEI committee going to be standing? Do we know that?
I think the conversation in front of the board is going to be kind of what that, how to configure that committee. Right now it's an ad hoc. It has presented their recommendations to the board. Now I think part of what the board has to determine is what are we going to do with the recommendations? And then two, what does the work of that committee or that work around equity, where does that go? Does that stay within the committee or does that find another means? So I think that's a conversation that's definitely still within the purview and on the agenda of the board. And I think part of that would then also be kind of looking at it, because I believe we've had members that have kind of ebbed and flowed off of that committee. So I think part of it is trying to reimagine what that committee looks like going forward if it is approved to continue. And I know I'm summarizing, Joan, what you and I have talked about.
And that's fine. And if it becomes a committee, a standing committee, is it going to be reauthorized with completely new members? And is it going to be really looked at for diversity of thought on the meeting, on the committee? Because whoever picked out the committee, I don't know who did it, they did not do a very good job for diversity of thought. Maybe a diversity of work experience, board members, teachers, community members, students, but they didn't get very good diversity of thought.
All right. Yep. Thank you for your comments. I think that's something that definitely the board will have to be looking at as they kind of go through with that committee.
Okay, so you don't know yet because you don't know if standing.
We don't know yet.
Right. There's not a...
reopen it and make sure that's an emphasis is all around diversity. Below the iceberg, things below the surface are just as important as things above the surface.
All right,
Thank
very
you.
good. Thank you for your comments. I come over here.
Hello. So I'm going to start out by saying that, I'm truly lucky to live in America. I think America is one of the greatest countries in the world. And I don't say that lightly. I've been to 68. There's only 190, 200 countries in the world, so about a third of them. I got to see a lot of those while I was in the service. And I think one of the things that makes America as great as it is not what it is today, but what it aspires to be, right? So America is great because it always wants to do better. And that's in essence the reason we were formed. That's, in all the doctrines, that's the underlying theme is as a country, we need to do better. And so I align with that because I'm a father. And an aligning principle, for me is good enough is never good enough. And if I could do better for my son, it's my moral obligation to leave this world a better place with more opportunity for the generation that he's in than I had when I was in it. So again, I'm very fortunate to live in this amazing country, and right now we're all struggling with this concept of CRT and DEI. And it's not just an issue that plagues us, it's a plague globally, but more so nationally. But we're sitting today in this auditorium, and I'm going to talk to you as a community member, right? So aside from all this global talk and national talk and political hot button talk and, partisan talk, I'm going to break it down. So my name is Jay Kang. I've lived in Waunakee for 6 years. I'm in Savannah Village. I'm a first-generation Korean American. I'm a husband to the most wonderful woman I know. She happens to be white. I'm the father to the most amazing son that I know. He's multiracial. But to know him as just multiracial is doing yourself the worst disservice. Because as a kid, he's one of the most amazing, loving, empathetic, compassionate human beings I know. I'm biased, I'm good with that, but I'm going to put it out there. Because like I said before, my biggest commitment in life is to leave the world a better place than when I found it. So, good enough is never good enough. And just because things have been the way they have been for so long, doesn't mean that that's the way it needs to be moving forward, right? So, racism and the word racist. You're a racist. When you hear that word and it makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should think on that a little, have some introspection, right? Because I get it. The word racist, it is hugely loaded. I don't want to be called a racist. I don't want to call you a racist. You could do the most racist thing in the world, and it makes me feel bad calling you a racist, right? But I'm not worried about the racists we see. I'm not worried about the racists we know. There's a guy in a white hood burning crosses. I get it. He's going to be him. I'm going to be me. That's the racist we can see. What I'm worried about and what I fear for the next generation is the racist we don't, or the racist that doesn't know. And again, using the word racist is huge. Let's just change it up. Culturally, multiculturally challenged, or diversity averse. I don't know. Call it what you want, right? But these are the people. These are a lot of people I know, right? And I'm just going to be very frank with you, right? Like there are times where overtly or subvertly something you said offended me. And maybe in that situation I didn't tell you. I didn't want to embarrass you. I don't want to be embarrassed. But either way, it wasn't brought up. And I apologize, and I won't do that in the future because I did you a disservice too. But please know that as a person of color that lives in your community, this is very real. Not only for me, but for my son. We have close friends that looked at numerous houses that ended up not living in this community because it wasn't very diverse. And so we're at the loss.
You got, wrap it up. Thanks.
So I'm going to wrap it up here. Listen, I assume positive intent in everybody. And I know that we're all parents. We want what's best for our kids. But sometimes we don't know that what we want isn't really what's best for our kids. So a vast majority of the children in our community are saying that there is racial disparity. We should listen to them. And we should do better, because good enough is never good enough. And as a parent, it's your moral obligation to leave this better than you found it.
Yes.
So
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Jay, I'd like to thank you for your service, by the way. My name is Brittany Phelps, not the new librarian at Prairie Elementary. I do not work for the school district. I keep getting confused for that very nice woman, so I just want to let everyone know I am not her. I have lived in Waunakee about 8 years. I'm a non-Akeean. Maybe some of you have heard that. I don't know if that's good, bad, or otherwise. I'd like to thank Randy and the board and the DEI committee. In the last several years, I've had an opportunity to work with the board members and Randy on some issues not related to DEI, and I found them all to be very open and always willing to listen and provide feedback, even if we have not always agreed. But we've always found, I think, common ground. And when we went through these other topics and we spent hours talking to one another, I really believe that the board wants what's best for our kids. I don't think they're in it for themselves in any way, shape, or form. That being said, I'm here tonight not for myself, I'm here for my kids. I have a 6th grader and a 3rd grader, and they can't be here. It was beautiful when I left. They wanted to ride their bikes, and I'm going to speak for them since I'm the adult. I'm here to speak for my son, who didn't understand why last week on the bus, his neighbor was called the N-word. He didn't understand. Mom, don't people know that you can't say that? Don't people know that these are people with feelings? Griffin, I don't know what other people think or feel, was my answer. I'm here for my son Griffin also, who recently told me that classmates said, last under their chair is gay, and he said, well, gay means happy and homosexual, and I think both of those are pretty okay to be. Mom, why do I know that? And other kids don't know that. I don't know. I don't know. I'm here for my daughter, who recently cut her hair. Well, not herself, but I took her to a salon, and she got her hair cut in a really cute pixie. And someone on the playground said, well, are you a boy or a girl? Mom, why doesn't he know that girls can have short hair? Again, I don't know. So I'm here to speak for them, because I know what I'm teaching my kids in my home, to be empathetic and not tolerant, but embrace the difference of others and help anyone who needs it, regardless of whether it's a disability or racism that they're experiencing, or a friend who just might be having a bad day. I I hope that we're all teaching our kids that. But I love that the DEI committee and the board is doing this great work to make sure that the places where my kid really spends most of their time awake is a place of inclusivity and a place that is diverse and a place where they can feel accepted. Because what if my son is gay? What if my daughter is transgendered? And they're hearing this language and it's hurtful and it impacts them. And they're trying to figure out who they are. And by arguing and disputing about whether these things are acceptable, just makes it worse. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey, Randy, I wanted to address something real quick.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Hi, my name is Caleb Connors. I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm a junior and I'm a queer student. One of many, and like many, I've had negative experiences in the school district. I'm scared of being queer and myself in school. Don't get me wrong, I'm very proud. I'm very proud of my identity as a queer person. My parents are proud of me, my friends are proud of me. Despite this, I'm scared. I'm scared of going to the bathroom. I was told to use a gender-neutral bathroom, so I did, and I got bullied for it. I get made fun of just walking through the hallway. Just last Friday, I was harassed in the Commons, which is the cafeteria in the high school. Just by walking by a table, nothing more. A group of students looked me dead in the eye and pretended to throw up. This has been going on for 4 years, and all I want is to feel safe. And I think this committee is important to prevent stories like mine. And above all else, I am very scared that I'm not going to be taken seriously because I am a youth and that, I'm not an adult, but I will be in a year. So I just hope I'm taken seriously and my concerns are taken into consideration.
Great. Thank you.
I'm Brian Hafer, I'm one of the board members, and your question was really directed to us, so I wanted to stand up. We have heard the concerns regarding the restructuring of the DEI, and that is something that we are discussing and we have discussed. It may not be that evident in some of our meetings, but we are at that point where we have to take what the report says, look at the structure and who we put on there. So we are looking at that. So I just wanted to address you directly from the board that is a concern, and that's something we are looking at. So.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I'm Madison. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but it just seems like a lot of adults in this room seem a little confused as to why we're holding this meeting in the first place, because a lot of adults, I know maybe not in here, but in the community, think that everything in Waunakee is fine, and I've had peers tell me that Waunakee isn't racist or any of those because they don't see it, but at the same time, they are my white peers, and obviously they're not going to have anything directed towards them. I've lived here my whole life, and throughout my elementary, middle, and high school years, I've experienced racism from peers, like other students, teachers, adults, and it's not the greatest because it feels like a lot of the adults don't think it's a problem, and us as students don't really have a whole lot of power in inflicting certain rules and stuff, or enforcing certain rules. And it feels like a lot of the time that we're unheard because sometimes people just turn a blind eye to it. And I know up until this point, it was more of facing racism and all that on a case-by-case basis instead of trying to teach the entire district, or at least its students, that we aren't the same. We're just asking to be treated the same. There's really No difference between, I mean, there is, we're not the same, and denying our differences is denying who we are and what we come from, and I'm very proud of where I come from. And my family or my mom, they all think that I could pass for white if I really wanted to, and I can, and I can't even imagine the type of situation that my peers and the people I care about, them being just a little 2 tones deeper than mine, what they even have to go through, because I know that, like I said, I could pass for white, and it's kind of scary to experience all those things that I have from peers, upperclassmen, people in power and stuff. So I just don't think we should make it political, because it feels like a lot of people are kind of choosing sides. It's not a political thing at all. We're just asking to be treated the same as everyone else. And we're just asking for the same opportunities as everyone else, so.
Okay. Thanks, Maddie.
My name is Candace Miller. I grew up in Waunakee. I have 2 sons in the district. One is a junior and the other is in 6th grade, both of whom are disabled. The first thing I want to start off with is thank you to the staff and the board. The special education department in Waunakee far outbeats any other district that I looked into before we moved here. I'm going to say something that's going to be hard for some people to hear. If it weren't for the staff and the paraeducators, my son wouldn't have any friends in school. And it's hard to hear that, and I'm sure other students may not realize it. But he gets avoided solely because of that wheelchair. He is in AP classes. His disability does not affect his mental capacity whatsoever. And I'm not trying to take away from any of the racial stuff. I'm trying to expand on it. It goes far more. It's not just race. People with disabilities. My son gets mocked in the lunchroom regularly. Kids make it a joke out of, oh, go sit by the handicapped kid. And it's something that we can work to teach our kids better in general, not to do that to people. Because mentally, emotionally, his disease does not affect him at all. It is solely physical. So to any of the other students here that have experienced being judged, I promise you that is one kid that will sit with you and he won't judge you. So there's no harm, and if you want to know what's wrong, ask him. He'll tell you. He's not shy. So that's all. I just wanted to say we've done a lot, but we can still do more. So.
Thank you.
My name is Holly Larson, and I'm here tonight as a parent of 4 daughters, 3 of which are current students in the district. I'm also here tonight as a conservative, Christian, white female. I'm here tonight as a supporter of LGBTQ rights. I'm here tonight to support minority and disabled students. I am pro-life, pro-medical freedom, pro-healthcare reform, pro-gun rights, pro-LGBTQ rights. And I'm here tonight feeling stuck in the middle of 2 angry, polarized political groups. I no longer identify with any of them, but I do feel that there are some very important and valuable aspects to both sides. I'm asking that all sides try to look at this from a different perspective. We all need to take off our political lenses of polarization for a second. Take a deep breath. Replace those lenses from a place of compassion caring for your fellow man, woman, person, and kindness towards others. Many of you know what this flag is. All summer, this flag was hanging on my porch, right next to an American flag. There is no dichotomy in that display. There is no polarization. It signifies that we are both a proud American family and we support LGBTQ plus community as a whole. But also it's a sign to my own child that I support them. I've heard it said that Waunakee does not have a problem with equality and inclusion. This is proof against that theory. In the dark of night, someone came up to my front door, walked to the back of my porch to try to remove this. But it was up high, the hooks were not easily reached, so instead it was cut down, cut in half. Half ended up on the cement floor of my porch, half continued to hang from the porch, and my child saw it in the morning on the way to school. 1 week prior, my child had been the victim of an online bullying through Snapchat from fellow students. Coincidence? 1 week. We'll never know, but that flag flew all summer. No disturbances. It's important that our kids learn the truth about our history as a country. It's also important that our kids aren't taught to believe that they are inherently evil based on the color of their skin. We left another school district for many reasons. At the forefront were incidents with a 5th grade teacher who constantly told the students that Christian white males were evil and to blame for all of the current problems in the U.S. And daily bullying from a child who called my 3rd grader a racist and told the class not to play with her or he'd beat them up. No one wants that for Waunakee. So how do we move forward? Let's start by ending the gaslighting, listening more than we speak, remembering that we all have value and deserve to be treated as such. Parents and the district both need to do better to protect our vulnerable children, and they've got a good start. But we need to work together for our kids. Can we be good role models for our children and make this happen?
Thank you. Lizzie.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I was a senior at Waunakee. I just graduated this year, and as you can tell, I'm part Black. That has been an identifier for me for many years going to Waunakee. I've been to Waunakee since I was 4th grade, and every single year I can tell you that I've been called the N-word. I've been called the N-word on multiple choices or just chances, and just, it's horrible. It's straight up horrible. And almost every single time, nothing has been done. Because teachers don't know how to react. Teachers don't know what to do. And I completely understand that. But how do you think that makes me feel? How do you think that makes all the children who are Black or any minority getting called a racial slur? It is straight up horrible. And I understand that teachers don't know what to do, but this is what needs to get learned. This is what teachers need to learn, and this is what also students need to learn. Because it is coming from the household. Like someone said before, don't speak in front of your kids, because their kids are taking it to school, and it's hurting kids. It is affecting their mind. I can tell you the amount of times that I just think back and I've been called the N-word on the track field and just feeling horrible for the rest of the day. It just makes me feel like crap. So what I just have to say is that just don't do that. Don't tell your kids that saying the N-word is okay. or telling them that they can't be best friends with a person in the LGBTQ community. Like, that's not okay. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Izzy.
Hi, my name is Jessica, and I have a daughter who is at the intermediate school. And I'm really glad that I'm speaking after this young lady because it is basically about just what she said. When I hear children talk about being called the N-word or being called LGBTQ plus slurs, it hurts my heart. It did when I was a kid and I grew up in a small town. I hated hearing it then, I hate hearing it now. And I think as parents, we probably all feel the same way, feel that pain in our heart thinking about kids getting called like the N-word. I mean, it's horrible. And I think we'd probably all like to believe that our kids would not be the kids that would say that to someone. And so I would ask all of the parents in this room tonight or whenever to have a talk with your kids and ask them if they hear that word at school. And if they say that word at school, and if their friends say those words, I mean, the slurs, I mean, especially the N-word, but also other slurs that are commonly heard in this community. Ask your kids if they use those words, if they hear those words, and say, I just want you to know that, like, it's not okay. Like, and if they have a friend that is called that, or if they have a friend that says that, like, teach them to just stand up for the kid that's being bullied, or to say to their friend, even if it's later, just like, hey, that's just not cool. We need to have kids that, not only not say these words, but kids that stand up for, and are not afraid to confront their friends that do. So I know that we all think that our kids would not be the kids that would say that, but just have that conversation with your kids and just make sure that they know that you're not okay with that. Because obviously it's coming from somewhere, and I don't think any of us wants to think that that's our kid. So, thank you.
Thank you. Walter?
Hi, my name is Walter Stenz. I am a teacher here at the high school. I'm an English teacher. I've been teaching kids in Waunakee for 18 years now. For all 18 of those years, I start my class with a story. It begins with all of the people of the world gathering on a high ridge, and they look over the world and all of its beauty below them. And as they look, a vast blue mist covers over the land. And while they wait for it to clear, the people begin telling a story, the story of their life, everything that they've seen, everything that they've heard, all of their experiences. And as they speak, that mist churns. But after a time, there are only a few people left to tell their stories, and someone shouts, "Stop! Enough! Enough of us have spoken. We must turn and find the earth again." And as that person screams out, the mist parts, and the people see below them that the earth is changed. It's grown into the shape of the stories that the people have told, a shape as new and wondrous as each of their experiences. But the world was not finished, because not everyone was given a chance to speak. The story continues to say that some people believe that evil and hate entered the world that day because not everyone had been given their voice. And some people think that the world might even be worse than it is if everyone had been given a chance to speak. Some people say that untold stories are the only ones of any value. And others claim that, in fact, it's those stories that haven't been told that are the most important. But I love how the story ends because it makes the claim that, in fact, the storytelling didn't stop, and that all of this is just one more story, and the world is still there beneath us in that blue mist, waiting for our words to give it form. I've told many of your children this story for 18 years, and it's always gone along with this. The reason why I teach English is because I think stories matter. We've heard a lot of stories here tonight. I know some of them have changed the way that I view the world. And I've used this tale to hopefully empower students. I keep telling them that if you want to see change, listen. If you want to make the world a better place, hear the people around you and learn how to speak your own story. I tell them that that's what our English classes try to do. That's what literature tries to do. I know that there might be a fear sometimes that we're doing less for some to do more for others. I've been trying to help for the last several years the English department grow to include more stories. You know, I see the committee's report talks about continuing to explore and to include more diverse voice. For a long time, we've been limited in the types of stories that we've had for some of our classes. That's not our job. I think our job is to try to encourage as many voices as we can. As teachers, we try to create a safe space for all of these stories to be heard. I'd encourage that if you do have questions about how we go about this, what kinds of things we use, what we want to bring into our classrooms, how we help people share their voice so that they can change the world, please. You can ask me about anything that I teach, and I will tell you why I do it. I believe at the end of that conversation, you'll see the value in that. If you don't, we'll talk even longer. I want you to recognize, though, that that's our goal. To increase the stories and to make sure that everyone has a place where they can be heard, because that's how we make the world better. That's what we're trying to do in your classroom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kaylee Krushak, and I'm a senior at Waunakee. I wasn't going to speak today, but I just decided I will. I'm transgender. I transitioned to a girl when I was 11, which I know some people might not agree with in this room. And I have faced a lot of discrimination by other students here. In middle school, I've been called gross. I've been called an it. A few years ago, my friends didn't invite me to a party because there were boys there, and none of the boys wanted to hook up with me. But I have something in the trans community called passing privilege, meaning that when a lot of people see me, the first thing they don't see me as trans. A lot of them just think I'm a normal girl. And for a lot of kids at Waunakee who aren't like me, who they don't pass as the gender they want to, they face a lot of worse discrimination than me. And I've seen just the way they're treated by other students, and it just breaks my heart. And I think saying that everything's good in Waunakee and nothing bad happens here is really not true, because I've heard that so many people in my grade have just said the N-word whenever it's just a group of white people that's we're talking, they'll just say the N-word, and then they're just well, there's no black people here, so whatever. Or a week ago when I was in study hall in the commons, the cafeteria, someone drew a Nazi symbol on one of the tables, and I didn't say anything about it because I don't really know what to do. But yeah, I just think saying that nothing bad happens here and that all of this discrimination is over is hurting these minority groups instead of helping them.
Thank you. All right. Just to take a look before you start real quick, just want to make a quick announcement. Right now we're at about 7:57, so we're getting close to our 8 o'clock time. I guess what I'd like to do is the folks that are in line, I'd like to respect them being able to speak and get their comments made. I have just a few questions that were submitted to me prior that I'd like to try to address before we conclude this evening. So just to kind of respect the time where we're at, but we're right around 8 o'clock. We'll go a little bit over so we can respect the folks that are in line, and then a couple other questions. So Greg, thank you.
Hello. I have 2 kids in attending Waunakee schools, and I believe my children must be educated about racism, slavery, and objective factual history, and the progress we have made as a country. I have taught them to embrace individuals as they present themselves, whether by physical characteristics or the identities they present, that every person has intrinsic human value, and to be kind to all. To pull that kid off the buddy bench that no one else is including, to stand up for those being victimized by others. So much so that a teacher at a parent-teacher conference had to tell me about having to rein my daughter in about being the cop of the playground, interjecting in others' arguments when she thought someone else was getting bullied, and then getting her own feelings hurt. I want every child to have an equal opportunity to succeed. And I think the school and teachers are doing a good job in making that happen. Individuals exhibiting prejudicial behaviors should be rebuked and held to consequence. Individual acts of racism, prejudice of all kinds, happen in our society and in Waunakee. Staff should be able to address those incidents. I do believe we all want the best for our children, but we do have differences in ideology. I have a different ideology than what I have observed with some partnerships the school has been making and the DEI committee has been communicating about. I believe the theory of systemic racism, that whites consciously oppress people of color through law, policy, and practice within our Waunakee government, schools, religion, family structure, is poisonous, breeding victimology and self-loathing. School district partnerships and learning projects have brought this theory into our community. Theories of intersectionality are divisive and drive us to care more about placing individuals in collectivist groups rather than focusing on individuals' need and personal responsibility. Identity politics, theories of white privilege, social justice, socioeconomic engineering, ideologies of wealth redistribution have no place in our schools. During the last DEI ad hoc committee meeting on September 21st, opposing viewpoints and ideology to the DEI's committees were labeled as hate, suggesting police security might be needed in the future because you just don't know what people might do. The chairperson stated, quote, "People have been reaching out, they heard what happened in the board meeting. We should not allow that as a community. We should not at all," quote. So now we have the Waunakee Community School District's DEI committee suggesting we infringe on freedom of speech because opposing ideology is viewed as hate and potentially violent. The chairperson even stated at the end of his presentation to the board on September 13th, diversity includes political views. There's nothing wrong with debating political views here in our conversation. However, interjecting them into the school domain within staff training, partnerships, approaches is wholly inappropriate. Much of this insidious injection of political ideology has been mandated over the last 10 years through the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction under the progressive ideology of Governor Evers. The DEI committee was handpicked with membership guidelines, which aren't being currently followed, largely on the grounds of demographic identity. But what appears not to have been included in any meaningful way was diversity of thought, of ideology, objectively demonstrated by not one member speaking out against the characterization of opposing ideologies at the previous DEI board meeting as hate. A group formed to champion diversity and inclusion appears to have none concerning opposing ideologies. I'd like to know what the school district proposes to do to rectify the ideological inequalities that have been constructed within the DEI committee.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think part of the question you had, I think that's kind of what Brian was addressing to one of our previous folks. Greg was trying to, that's a piece that definitely the board will be reviewing with regards to kind of what the future of that work is and kind of any additional makeup charge, et cetera, particularly as there's been changeover in that committee and looking at what it looks like in the future. So those decisions haven't been made yet.
Thank you, and I'd also like you to just address the disparity that was found in special ed referrals.
Sure.
To my understanding that there was no, or every referral was found to be race neutral, and there were no inappropriate referrals made. and I have the report.
No, sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, basically what Greg's referring to is a disproportionality piece. It's not necessarily my expertise, but I'm going to ask Tiffany to come up and help me out here for a second. I mean, the disproportionality piece was something I spoke about in my slide presentation, and it was with regards to special education disproportionality of our black students. So if I can ask you to help me out here, Tiffany.
Yeah, to make it very simple, what it basically the state and federal government are looking for, because we receive federal funding, just like every school district receives federal funding, we're required to report out all of our data. So that data goes to DPI, and then DPI sends it to the federal government. So to really simplify what disproportionality is, our percentage for all of our students in our district, percentage of students that have special needs is 9.7%. So what the DPI does, or what they look at, is they look at a risk ratio, and they look at each demographic group. So for this example, excuse me, they were looking at all of our demographic groups, but we were indicated in the black area. So looking at, and again, I'm just throwing out numbers here because I wasn't here last year to know the exact number, but the risk was higher for black students to be in special education. So say it was 15% of our black students were in special education. Theoretically, every group should be 9.7%, because that's what our overall average is. So that's a simple way of looking at it, but it's a specific statistical risk ratio that they use. So it's really not about individual evaluations or there being bias or racial inequity within that individual evaluation. It's about how our whole system works, and how is our system functioning. That's why some of that federal money, we were required to use some of that federal money to look at how is our system functioning and how is our system supporting students of color across the board. So some of the education that we did with adults was related to the requirement of allocating time and resources to looking at our systems and how our systems feed into special education.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate your help. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ophelia Whitley. I'm a sophomore at the high school here. I would like to say I'm a white passing mixed person, and it's tough seeing people of color that are a part of a community that I'm in go through struggles like this, and I wish I could help them, but I don't know how, because I'm white and I don't know if I'm the right person to help them. And I also just want to say that it's sad to see that adults think that basic human rights now are considered political, and I'm scared to talk about basic human rights because they're considered political now in politics, like basic health care and getting that health care and stuff like that. It makes me sad because I want things to be accessible to everybody, and I want my friends to feel safe just in general and like walking home and anywhere, because they deserve to be safe. They deserve to live happily and not in fear of being harmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Forgot what's the.
Good evening. I'm Leslie Petty, and I'm an African-American parent residing in Waunakee, Wisconsin. I am raising 2 African-American sons. So as you can imagine, many of you that are sitting there in the audience, raising your child as a white person is a heck of a lot easier than raising 2 black sons in Waunakee, Wisconsin. I want to thank the school board, and I also want to thank the superintendent and administration for the work that they're doing to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion in this community. I am also a member of the DEI Ad Hoc Committee, so I can tell you firsthand of the remarkable work that's been done through the committee, and not because of my own membership, but because of the loyalty and the commitment of the members that sit on this committee, who is looking at ensuring that there is a voice represented. And what I would say that is more important than anything is representation. We need to have representation at the table. There needs to be a voice of all individuals, LGBTQ+, physical abilities, culture, ethnicities, religion, all across every spectrum. That is key to the success in this community. This community continues to grow and develop, and it will continue to be much more diverse than what it is today. And in order for us to make a difference, we must ensure representation. Your lived experience is not my lived experience. Your son's lived experience is not my son's lived experience. And to ensure an equitable and comprehensive learning environment, we must ensure that all voices are being heard. Quite frankly, that's not being done. And if there's any consideration about disbanding this group, I would say that is probably a poor judgment on leadership. What we should be doing is actually building other communities and other groups that will continue ensuring the safety, security, and, as was mentioned earlier, a sense of belonging in our community. That's what we should be doing. We should be finding ways in which we can branch out and not depend so much on this particular community, but looking at it in a much broader context. Because guess what? The diverse perspectives and the representation, it brings strong citizenship to all of our kids. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sylvia Guerin. I wanted to thank the board for organizing this open discussion and for everybody that shared that part of their stories. I learned a lot today, and I learned a lot about DEI every day. And I'm thinking that the more we come with a learning mind, the better we get at this. The more respectful we get at talking about this sometimes tough topics. I am originally from Brazil. I am married to an Irish guy, and we live in Waunakee, Wisconsin, where we have a freshman that was born in Madison, Wisconsin. So talk about diversity in a family. 2 years ago, my husband and I became citizens of the United States, very proudly so. And it was a very important experience for us above all, because when we are born a citizen in a country, you don't really think too much about what it means. When you have to go through a process of becoming a citizen, it actually makes you a better citizen of the world. Studying about the history of the United States, learning about all the presidents and the 100 questions we had to be prepared to answer, was quite eye-opening for us. And I think we are better because of that. And we are also very much more responsible for what it brings in the sense of what we have to contribute to our community. I think we said a lot that as parents, we all have very similar goals, that the kids that we have in our schools need to feel a sense of belonging, and that we all want to prepare them to have growth opportunities as citizens and contributors of our community, but also of their communities in the future, where they will belong. Believe me, my mom and dad, when I was in elementary school or even high school, had no idea that I would marry an Irish guy and move to Waunakee, Wisconsin. Here I am. So all of you here, our kids and your kids might become a minority somewhere else. And it's a great thing for them. It's a fantastic experience. So these conversations touch all of us because we simply don't know. And it's our job to make them all a better citizen of the world. We had a community discussion back in July where some of the students, about 4 of them, and then so many more of you spoke up today here. And you made me come here to this mic because I was quite nervous to speak. But you really are amazing people, and you need to be heard. And the DI committee will help us to keep tracking of our progress. So I'm here in favor in continuing the DI, and as Leslie said just before me, to grow this. There are many, many citizens of this community that are open to support. I'm one of them. If any of the world history teachers would like to have me to talk about Brazil someday, or my husband to talk about Ireland, we're available for that, and we would love so. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eleanor Lake. I'm a sophomore here, and I just wanted to help and let everybody know and recognize the issues that go on here. Just within this past school year, I've been in geometry or advanced algebra class, and everybody got up to get protractors, and not on like 1 or 2, but maybe 10 protractors, we found Nazi symbols. Actually, just today, I heard someone say the F slur 3 times. I had asked them to stop after they said it once, but they had continued to say that it really wasn't that big of a deal. Although for me, someone that's bisexual, that honestly really offended me and really made me upset. There's been a lot of incidents just regarding like race, I guess. Just within this past week too, I've heard someone say the N-word, and I had told them that's not okay to say, and they had proceeded to say, well, I have a friend that's black, and they don't care, so it doesn't matter. And I just kind of wanted to be the voice for the people that aren't able to come up here and let everybody know that these things do go on, and they do affect just about everyone. And to the adults, what you say to your children does matter, because they just bring it to school and project it onto everybody else. So thank you.
Okay.
I'm the last one, yay! My name is Peyton Pierce. I'm a senior in high school here. Like many of my classmates, I wasn't expecting to come up here today, so let's hope I don't mess this up. I already did, but so I'm a little nervous, can you tell? I just wanted to get up here and, I guess, closing the night, say thank you to all the administrators, educators, and staff we have in the buildings, because through elementary school, intermediate school, middle school, and high school, I know I've had at least a couple teachers that I really bonded with and have had those serious conversations that I wasn't able to or comfortable having at home. I was able to express my full opinions and have those happy moments where they're the first person I see and I walk up and I'm like, oh my God, did you hear what just happened? Or I have those conversations where it's finals week at high school and I just need to have a good sit and cry. And I feel comfortable with those teachers enough to have those conversations. But I do know within my experience, my limited experience, I haven't had the experience that other people have necessarily had. And I know I am so thankful for those teachers for having the courage to try and navigate what they know, because I know that, with everything that's going on, we're trying to, teach teachers different things, but I think it's, words.
I'm so thankful for the teachers that do try and navigate, and I just want you all to be recognized as like such important figures to every student. Like, I'm sure you've all had at least one student where like that's broken down and cried in your room, and like I just am the voice of like those students, and I just want to say thank you for being that safe space and having those discussions, even though you all might not be qualified or have the knowledge to do that right now. So thank you.
All right, thank you. That does come to the end of our lines here. But I want to take just a minute, and I'm going to go through these quickly because we did have some folks who submitted some questions ahead of time, and I'd rather just try to address them here so we can address them publicly as opposed to trying to send something out separately, and then we'll conclude here in just a few minutes. I had a question from Brian King with regards to curriculum, with regards to American history, and what kind of changes have taken place and what kind of work has taken place in that space over the last few years. Really, the areas that we're having some work occur right now are with the Ho-Chunk Nation, particularly looking at Act 31 and how we can expand and bring forth and enhance our curriculum and our requirements for teaching about Native American history and culture. We're also working with the Nehemiah Project, which we have some of our social studies teachers who are going through a professional development opportunity through them to just learn more about Black history. So those are some things, but as far as some of that work, as far as what it's actually impacted curriculum-wise, I think that there hasn't been really a whole-scale kind of changing of curriculum, but there's some things that we are just trying to enhance our awareness and knowledge of. A question that came from Aaron Martin was with regards to what are we doing to educate our youth that everyone has struggles and that various techniques to overcome them. And I think that's a great point, that we are talking about barriers, but we often are also teaching all of our students about how do we overcome challenges, how do you build resilience among students, how do we help kids to really realize that when they hit a point of challenge, of how do you work through that. I think that's some things that our teachers do a great job just within their classroom. It's pieces that we try to teach throughout our curriculum from kindergarten all the way through our graduation. I think that's part of just our rigorous curriculum and approach to working with kids. Addressed one on 504. Question from Robert McPherson with regards to our school calendar and with regards to having school on Good Friday, or not having school on Good Friday, but having school on Yom Kippur, and would we ever consider having it on a non-religious, the day off on a non-religious day? I mean, that's a piece that we have discussed at different times within the calendar committee. We have a committee of staff that work on our calendar for every year, and then we bring that forward to the board. So Robert, that'll be a piece that we'll continue to bring back as we do calendar revisions for the future. Question from Andrea Feldmeyer with regards to one of the recommendations on the DEI committee with regards to advanced placement courses. Those are some of our coursework at the high school level with regards to the recommendation to be looking at how we can enhance the opportunities of kids within AP from different abilities and backgrounds. Talking to Mr. Schell, I don't believe most of our AP courses have a prerequisite, and I think the gist of, or at least the way I'm understanding that recommendation, is to encourage more kids to take part in our AP classes and to make sure that we are equally inviting kids in. We don't have a cap on those classes. There's not a prerequisite. We're just trying to include more students, and I think a rigorous curriculum is good for all kids. So I think that's where that came from. Yeah.
Throughout the discussion, I had asked about that AP question because we've been getting it from a board too. It's also AP courses. To take a national AP course, you have to pay a fee. Some people can't afford those. Right. And so that's where that sort of came from too. Right. And we do have that financial assistance to be able to help families who need to take a second ACT to better their scores or to take AP advanced class, because it does cost to take those exams.
Right, yeah, and what Brian's talking about is when you take an advanced placement course, one of the things the kids have at the end is the opportunity to take the advanced placement exam. There's a cost for that, so we can obviously address that from a financial standpoint, and then if students score at a high enough level on that test, they do receive different levels of college credit going forward. So those are really positive things for our kids as they move forward into college. It actually addresses some of those college credits before they even get there. as a parent. I know that's obviously been a very positive piece, but I think we're just trying to encourage more kids to participate in that. Another question was with regards to recruitment and incentives for BIPOC candidates. It's looking at a hiring practice, and does that mean that there will be higher salaries for BIPOC teachers? No, we have a salary schedule that we generally are adhere to as far as where we start our teachers at. But I will tell you that it's just like any other business. We have shortages, and we have people negotiate their salaries as they come in. So it's definitely a piece that we work within what the market is, but it's not a piece that you're changing the salary piece for any one individual. My last question here is with regards to really some of the staff training that we go through. So Julie Larson asked a question. I'm just going to read it. How can parents get involved with what the topics are? I think part of what we try to identify for some of our topics for our professional development are certainly through many of the things we've talked about tonight. Some of it is with regards to how do we work best with kids? How do we learn more about what some of the research and trends are with working with youth? How do we ensure that we can make those connections, and how can we help move all kids forward? And I think that's kind of the grounding piece for that. Our other professional development, which I don't think they were addressing here, is really trying to look at how do we enhance curriculum to address the evolving standards and the expectations that we have in our community. So I think the other questions that I received, I think we had about 29 comments or questions that came in prior to the meeting tonight. I think I've addressed all the ones that were questions-based. There were a number of them that were just saying, how do I get involved with this conversation? And I think that's just a good kind of a segue to kind of what our next step is. Because tonight is just a start, in my opinion. I mean, I think this has been, I want to say, first of all, thank you to everybody, because I think this has been a very good start to our conversation. This is definitely a piece that we've all had things that I know have resonated with us. I also know that when you look out at our audience, not everybody spoke. And I know that there's other opinions out there that we also want to hear. And I think that we need to create a format where we can have those discussions, not only as a school community, but as a community as a whole. So I'm hoping to work with the board to facilitate that separate, Joan, from our other engagement activities. I think we have some other topics we want to talk to you about. The one coming up in November is on student achievement. But I think we need to find some space where we can have some more roundtable discussions to continue some of the dialogue that we started tonight. But I want to first of all say thank you to everybody who's tuned in, and those folks who have been here in person and spending this evening with us. Some of the things that we will be talking about next, the board, as we've already addressed, and Brian, I think, addressed it at the mic, was with regards to the ad hoc committee and some of those recommendations. Those pieces will be coming forward. We'll be looking at kind of what that structure looks like and how we focus that work moving forward. Again, we're going to look at another way we can come together and continue this discussion, and this being a starting point. And we're also hoping that other people will join us again in November as we talk about student achievement, which is really kind of one of the core pieces that we all try to enhance with our students. So with that, I'm going to end this evening. Thank you very much for your attendance. I really appreciate you being here. I know many of us will stick around if anybody wants to talk to us afterwards. Thank you.